you can hear me on this. Last time I did a live video, there was an issue with the sound, and I'm looking into my laptop to see what it was that caused that issue. But for now, I'm on my phone, and I just wanted to do a video talking about the different aspects of practicing that can help you practice more effectively. One of the reasons I wanted to do these as live videos is I find when I am in front of my students, talking to them in person, that I find it's more personable, and that I make it a lot less complicated as well. Uh, that I usually am able to tell them things in a way that is enjoyable, fun, interesting, and that really resonates with them. And I often with my videos, if it's an educational video, I spend too much time on, the clip art and the other stuff, all of the details with it. And I find that that's not necessary. So, that being said, probably trim out this opening after this finishes going live. I'm Tim Rower from Rower Music Studios. I've got my notes up in front of me on the computer here, so I'll be looking at those to help keep me on track with some of the main points that I wanted to hit talking about practicing today. But I personally love talking about how to practice more effectively. I am a very hard worker. I sometimes spend too much time working, and sometimes on things that don't need to have that much hard work put in them, but more efficient work. And so when I had professors at my college that started teaching me about ways to think and do things differently in my practice, I was very interested. And since then, I've tried to explore this topic and think more about the way the brain works, the way the body works, to be able to practice more effectively. So today I wanted to talk about technique in particular. And I'm personally going to define technique as the basic skill set for doing something. And with that, technique, more particularly for musicians, is about how do I do things with the least amount of restriction, with the most power and strength, with the greatest sound production. And I often, as an instrumentalist, as a string player, I'll usually refer to string technique in regards to this, but I do think it's universally applied. It can apply to voice as well, and wind instruments, brass instruments, percussion, keys, keyboard instruments, and of course strings as well. But any of these instruments, really, I think a lot of these ideas behind technique are really essential. So, why do we bother with technique? Well, so much of what we do on a regular basis, I mean, it's so hard that our ideal is we find the most unrestricted way, the way that we can do it most easily, most effectively. And for this, then, I want to do a couple demos. One is with a bow, got my viola bow right here. And let's say that I'm starting this and I don't know how to hold it. If I just grab it like you might expect to grab a hammer, then this right here is going to present me with a lot of issues. Yes, I can pull on the strings, but if I'm trying to, this is not very flexible. I'm not going to easily get the right angle. You're going to get a lot of this motion right there. I mean, you can kind of get some of the motion, but there's not the flexibility necessary. And so that's why when we're dealing with bow technique, what we want is we want to find that acceptable bow hold that works for our fingers. And same thing with voice, that if I don't have my body in the right stance to create that lovely open resonant chamber to allow the sound to come out freely and easily, then it's just gonna be hard to do. So I like to think of this then as these technique skills. First of all, um, when I talk to my students about these, I like to think of them as being on a spectrum, that you've got your skill set that starts in one particular spot and then it progresses along these spots for each particular skill. And so the fundamental, most importantly, presented with an issue, you don't even know how to get to that technique, that fundamental way of doing it. And so how do we gain understanding of these physical techniques? I've thought of several. There's probably more. Leave some in the comments if you think of some more different ways to gain an understanding. The main ways that I thought about gaining these: number one, depending on the instrument that you're doing, including again voice, that you could have a private teacher. And private teachers are really helpful because they have that one-on-one time with you to help see what you're doing and see if they can help shift and shape what you're doing, hopefully ideally to your personality. Now, this is where when selecting a private teacher, we talk about this in depth in another video. I won't go too in depth right now, but the idea will be when you're looking, what are their qualifications? Are they, do they have a college degree for this specific instrument? How long have they been playing? Have they received private education for this as well? And beyond that, I like to also think the question, are they principles based? Sometimes you can get teachers who say thumb has to be here, fingers have to be here, and while that's not bad, especially for young kids, long term you want somebody who can tell you how to get there, but also teach you how to teach yourself how to get there. For me, I had a moment in college where my professor, he looked at my handset, and my thumb comes up pretty high. It comes up to here. And we'd never really thought about this too much, but when he was looking at my hand, I think the words he said were, "Tim, you have a freakishly long thumb." I'm not sure if that's just how I remember it, but when I look at my thumb, it is pretty high. It's close to this knuckle right here. And because of that, we worked on my bow hold in a more unique way after seeing this. We found that for me, normally we don't touch the hair. And that because of my hand having a freakishly long thumb, I actually end up touching the hair just a little bit with my thumb here. Yes, I lose a little bit right here of playability with my bow, but I gain a lot of power and strength and flexibility within here, and a lot of strength from having just that extra little bit touching up against the hairs there. And again, normally that's not the preference, but it was a trade-off for me, and I gained a lot of flexibility, a lot of power from my bow as soon as I made that little adjustment. And so I think that having a teacher that can recognize those little things is also very important. Other places you can go to uh, gain some understanding of these different techniques. One is videos. As a YouTuber, I feel like there's a little bit of a hypocrisy here in that I'm about to say be very cautious of YouTube videos. But I think it's fair to say this at the same time. That number one, you want to make sure you know that the video that you're watching, that it has the right qualifications. As kind of a quick story about this, I had seen this video on YouTube, and it said something like, "Oh, the core is a myth, and you can eat the whole apple. Core included. You just start from the bottom, eat it up." And I was like, "Oh, well, I didn't know that." And I didn't fact check this. I was young. And found out later after my stomach started having a lot of issues. I was eating a couple apples a day in this particular way. That the core is not a myth in an apple. Why? The apple seeds have cyanide in them, and so that's why we don't eat the seeds in the apple. And I had just taken for granted what I'd seen. So I think it's important when you see a video, fact check a little bit, make sure that the qualifications of the person are there. If they're a music teacher, excellent and great. If they've got experience, if they've got um, different things that will help make sure that they know what they know is good technique. I would also say that there's a lot of study you can do, again, reputable sources. I love Dr. Ivan Galamian's book on violin technique. It's wonderful, and $10 on iTunes. And it's been a great resource as I study and read some of his descriptions about the way that we do things. It's been really helpful also in teaching my students too. I would also say experimenting is probably one of the last ways. You got to try these things out and come to a conclusion of, oh, how do I do this? The other day I was playing a particular set of double stops, and for that I normally do my thirds with this setup right here. I've got my 2 and 4, and then my 3 and 1, 2 and 4, 3 and 1, back and forth. But then I realized, wait a second, I can't do this because this particular exercise had these double stops in 16th notes. And if I'm going to go from this to that to this to that, it's not going to be as effective uh, if I keep lifting these other fingers off and moving them out of the way. Yes, I need to move them out of the way, but they were moving pretty far off, something like that. And so that's when I realized, oh, lift him, yes, lift him, but stay close. And so experimenting gave me this ability then to work this particular technique when I'm doing this exercise with these double stops. And so I'd say when experimenting, then check your body. Try and feel what's happening within your body and see what is restricted, what feels tight, what feels um, difficult to move in the way that I want to move. And then as you're doing that, to try and then discover what are some different ways I can go about doing this thing. How do I get it so that I can then really feel unrestricted as I'm playing. So that's that first part that I wanted to talk about was understanding. You've got to understand the skills, and then as coming back to this spectrum of these techniques, our long-term goal is always we don't have to think about this technique all the time. A paraphrase from Dr. Ivan Galamian's book, section on practicing. One idea stuck with me. Our long-term goal is always to take the fundamental things we're doing all the time and make them so we don't have to think about them anymore. That's our long-term goal. So how do we then get from this understanding to the point where we're not thinking about it? The next step after just understanding that there is a technique there is to then start trying to get to a point where you can do it, where you can, I call this the operational level, that you can actually physically do it, even if it's not all the time. And for this then, what I'd say first and most important priority is try and experiment with it. Try and do things with it. I have a particular thing I have students do that is flicking of their wrist here that helps them move their bow pretty quickly and easily, but it feels weird. It's really hard to do. And so I send them home with the assignment. This is sort of the goal is free, unrestricted motion. And what I need you to do is just try and get flick, flick, flick. Think of throwing a frisbee, think of dribbling a basketball, but then say, okay, this is what it'll feel like when you get there. And once you know what it feels like, to try and then replicate that motion. And trying it, eventually you'll get it once. You'll be able to like, whoa, I just did it once. And then the key after that is keep doing it, keep experimenting, because then you'll get to the point where, oh, I did it twice. You can do it twice. You can do it several times. And eventually you'll start to be able to do it about half of the time, 50% of the time. Once you're able to do it at that point, I usually consider that to be the operational level. And our goal then even further is to push that to past that 50%. I have a stage I call post-operational. It's like not quite proficient, but you're doing it about 70% of the time. 70% is a great goal because you're getting closer to our ideal for proficiency, which is 80 to 90%. And obviously then once you're doing it often enough, that it is then going to be pushing closer towards something like 90%, 95%. And that's when we want to take it from simple basic stuff and try and add some difficulty to it. That difficulty will help solidify it in muscle memory. So if I'm doing something like, oh, I'm able to do this technique with simple, like on an open string or something, I'm able to physically do it, but I can't replicate it when I have to play it in a song. That's where we want to start doing this particular technique and push it to the point where even in those harder settings, you're getting it again at least 50% of the time, and then pushing it closer 60, 70%, 80% of the time, until in most settings, you're able to get it pretty comfortable. You're able to get it most of the time with the way that you want to do it. And that leads me to, I guess, a quick thought with this, which is that with thinking about how you develop this then, there's no getting around putting in work. that you've always got to put in that work. You've got to experiment, you've got to try, you've got to do it. I would love if there were some way that I could say, hey, I have the secret. And the way that you play the violin, take my $100 course and you're going to play the violin in 2 weeks and play it like, Jascha Heifetz and Itzhak Perlman, and you're gonna play like these masters. But there's no getting around the fact that you got to put in hard work. There's never that workaround to that. You have to put in hard work. It's not done otherwise. And so for this, then, when you're putting that work, though, what you want to try and do is get that feeling at first. I'm kind of doubling back on what I said earlier. I think this is an important point to make, though. Um, you have to put in the work to try and get the feel, and to see if, yes, oh, that's the feel, oh, that's the feel, okay. And once you've gotten past that hard work and you've progressed, and now let's say that you're at this proficiency point, you're getting more proficient with the skill. And I have a personal stage that I like to add in, which is, I call it ownership. Ownership is the ability to take what you're doing and take that particular skill and not think about it anymore. It happens almost automatically without any effort on your part. And of course, at this point, we're not thinking about it. We're not using our prefrontal cortex. In a future video, I want to talk more about the psychology behind this prefrontal cortex versus cerebellum, and thinking about it versus muscle memory. But in this case, once it's muscle memory, you're not thinking about it. It just happens, right? It's just doing it, and that is a beautiful place to be. I call that stage ownership. And how do you get there? Well, that is another video, another big in-depth video about practicing. But the basic necessity is that we own it. This is my thought. We own it by paying in the currency of mental energy and effort. That we've put in that time, that energy, that effort, and we've pushed it, and eventually it gets to the point where, yes, we own that skill. And how do we claim that we own it? Well, we've paid for it. We've paid for it with that hard work. Those are my basic thoughts for this particular video. I am hoping this has been beneficial. Let me see. I still don't know how to work this thing. Aha, okay, good. I'm hoping you all heard something off of this. But let me know in the comments what was useful, what was helpful, and if there was anything you want to learn particularly about, if there's anything that wasn't helpful, something that you might want more explanation on. Personally, I have some mental health struggles too, and I love that in a lot of the comment things in YouTube, that YouTube's been doing a better job of saying, make sure and be kind to each other, because you just don't know, what other people are going through. And so be kind, be gentle, but at the same time, let me know what I could do better with as well for these future videos. The next video, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the brain, about the different parts of the brain, and what I call the 3 keys to muscle memory, which as a quick preface for this, it all comes to the underlying principle of you have to pay in the currency of mental energy and effort. And those 3 keys, which we'll talk about in another video, are time, consistency, and focus. And that if you have those 3 things, they push things into your muscle memory faster. Once again, let me know anything, like the video if it was beneficial for you. Make sure and subscribe if you'd like to see more of these technique videos, as well as the other violin practicing videos that I've done. And leave a comment for other things that you'd like to see, and I will see you in the next video.